Welcome to another edition of the Southern Fried Paranormal Shelf. On today's menu is the Bloody Benders. Big thanks goes out to Haunted Salem for this one. Haunted Salem on Facebook, y'all check her out. Bloody Benders in the late 1800s, while traveling the roads of Labette County, Kansas, you might have come across a small bed and breakfast owned by the Bender family. As travel was slow via horse and cart, you may have felt inclined to stop off for the night, especially if you were a man, as the Bender's daughter Kate was quite beautiful and curvy. Unfortunately, should you stay the night, it was likely you were not going to leave again. The Bender family were all serial killers, and their list of victims was long. As you are shown to the place of honor at the dinner table, you probably would not take great notice of the thick curtain behind you that subdivided the little one-room cabin, or the trap door at your feet. Unfortunately, death was waiting for you there. Kate would serve you, entertain you with flirtatious conversation, her low cut and loose skirt keeping you distracted. As this was taking place, John Bender, the family's patriarch, and his son would be standing right behind you, a heavy hammer in their hands. When the time was right, they would swing the hammer, smashing you in the side of the head. This would leave you unconscious or dead, but either way, you were soon to be finished off. The table would be moved out of the way and the trapdoor opened, where you would be slid below the house to have your throat cut, spilling your lifeblood onto the cellar floor. From here, you would have all your valuable possessions taken from you and then buried in one of the various burial grounds dotted around the Bender property. Maybe you would be buried whole, maybe in parts. It all depended on the Bender's mood and whether you were easy to carry or not. You were then just another of the missing persons who had disappeared while traveling this part of the country. A statistic, your fate unknown until the murderous scheme was uncovered by almost pure luck. The Bender family killed more than a dozen people at their property between 1871 and 1873. In 1870, five families had settled in the Osage Township, Kansas, located along the Great Osage Trail, a main route for anyone looking for travel west. One of these families was John Bender Sr. and his son John Bender Jr. They made their land claim and began creating a home. The one-room cabin, a barn, and a well once creating sorry about that. The initial constructions were complete. They sent for Kate Bender and her daughter Kate. Okay, so they're both named Kate. This small community of families were all spiritualists, of which Kate was a self-proclaimed psychic and healer. Ma and Pa spoke very little English, were not very nice to their neighbors, and were considered half-wits. John spoke English well, but was also considered a half-wit due to his tendency to laugh aimlessly and at length. Kate, on the other hand, was beautiful, charming, and quite the businesswoman. The Bender's home was subdivided by a sheet, allowing the back end to become their living space and the front half to be a general store and a place people could come for a meal. Kate also utilized it for her spiritual practices, healings, lectures, and seances. It was a quiet community travelers went through, and although many went missing, no one thought there was murder happening in their own town. That is, until the body of a man was found in a nearby creek with his head crushed and throat cut. The following year, 1872, two other men were discovered in a similar state, and soon people realized something was quite wrong, as finally the disappearances seemed to be linked to the Osage Township. Groups of vigilantes were formed who would then travel around arresting anyone who seemed untoward or had the slightest criminal record. However, with no proof, these people were released by authorities only to be chased out of the town. In late 1872, a man and his infant daughter were relocating to another part of the country, and when they were not heard from again, a neighbor, Dr. York, followed their trail to go looking for them. He also was never seen again. Dr. York had two brothers, one a colonel who went looking for him, and the trail led straight to the Bender family. The Benders did say that the doctor had stayed at the inn but had left the next day and that perhaps he had been attacked and killed by the local Indians. That would have been that had Ma Bender not chased a woman from the inn screaming and threatening her with a knife. Colonel York returned to the inn with armed men to find out what had happened. Ma Bender could not speak English very well, but upon being pushed, she flew in a rage, saying the woman she had chased was a witch who had cursed her. Kate Bender settled the situation down and invited the colonel back the following night so she could use her psychic abilities to help him locate his doctor brother. The colonel did not fall for the ruse and was convinced the Bender family were guilty of all the disappearances but needed proof. A meeting was arranged at the township in the hopes of organizing a warrant to search all the homes, but the arguing began, and soon once again the Osage Indians were in the firing line. Many thought they were to blame. As all of this was taking place, the Bender family quietly took their possessions and fled. Their disappearance was not noted for several days, but when it was, there was a massive outcry, and many people descended on the property to search it for the missing people. They opened the trap door and found it blood-stained, and the floor was dug up and found that so much blood had seeped into it that they were still digging up clotted blood several feet down. The cabin was then lifted by several dozen men and carried some distance so the entire floor could be easily dug up. No bodies were found, however, when they started to dig in the vegetable garden and apple orchard, the bodies were discovered. One of the first found was Dr. York's. A majority of the bodies were found to have one side of the head smashed in and their throats cut. Not all bodies were found in the ground, as some were discovered in the well along with other dismembered remains. As the word got out about the bloody Benders, crowds of people traveled to the property, which was soon stripped of every possession left by the family as souvenirs. And once that was done, people started to take the wooden cladding home with them. Everyone wanted a piece of this macabre history. A friend of the Benders was found by the mob and taken back to the house and questioned. When he had no answers, they hanged him from a rafter, and when he lapsed into unconsciousness, they took him down, woke him up, and continued interrogating him. This cycle of hanging and release was repeated several times before he was allowed to leave. Many other people would be caught, tortured, and arrested under suspicion of being in cahoots with the Bender family or being a Bender. However, it is not known whether the Bender family themselves were ever caught. Bounties were put on their heads, and although several groups claimed to have captured and killed the Benders, none ever claimed the reward. Many of the remains found on the property were never identified or claimed and were reburied near to where they were discovered. Hope y'all enjoyed this little bloody macabre story, and I'll catch you again next time.